working with percentages, we're going to do percent problems two different ways. One way in this video is proportions. The other way is with equations, and that'll be in a different video. So remember that a proportion is a ratio equaling another ratio. So we've got two fractions set equal to each other. And when you're doing these, you kind of want to think of part to whole. So the total of something is always going to be in the denominator, while the part's going to be on the top. Now, the nice thing about, I'm going to put this in a box so we can focus on the inside. When you're dealing with percents, when you hear the word percent, you should automatically think out of 100. So one of these fractions is always going to be the percent over 100. So you're always going to have half of your proportion without even really doing anything because it's the percentage piece. Now the other side is where you're going to think part to whole. And if you want to look for like key words, the key words is over of. Of 30 means 30 is the total. So of indicates the total. So that's kind of the concept and the mindset that we're going to go through with these problems. So the first one, what amount is 20% of 160? Now, I always start with the percentage, always, because when I see 20%, that automatically to me means 20 over 100. Now, when I look at my other fraction, you can see we have of 160. Well, of implies the total. The total goes on the bottom, and we see what amount is. There's our unknown value, x. So now, to solve a proportion, we cross multiply. So 100 times x is 100x. 160 times 20 is 3,200. This equal sign splits it equally. To get x by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 100. These reduce, and I'm left with x equals 32. Let's do another one. 65% of 300 is what amount? Well, again, I'm going to start with the percent. 65%, percent means out of 100. That equals, and when I see this other side, I first see of 300. Of implies the total, goes on the bottom, and we have the unknown in the top. So now I can solve 100 times x is 100x equals 300 times 65 is 19,500. I divide both sides by 100 in order to reduce those 100s and leave x by itself, and I'm left with 195. 72 is 40% of what number? Again, percent, 40 over 100. I always start there. Equals, okay, 72 is. Is implies the part of what number. The x there goes on the bottom. Again, we cross multiply. So 40x equals 7,200. Multiply bottom of one to the top of the other. Divide both sides by 40, and x is 180. So the process is the same for each one of these problems. Next, 80%. As soon as you see that percent, it goes over 100. Equals, I see of what number is 32. Is over of. Cross multiply. 80 times x equals 100 times 32. Divide both sides by 80, and I get a value of 40. 60 is what percent? Now you can see what percent. I don't know what percent. So there's my x over 100. But my other fraction, you can see of 200 is 60. Cross multiply. 200x equals 100 times 60. Divide both sides by 200, and x equals 30. But go back and remember, what percent? So this, my friends, is 30%. Don't forget your percent sign. That's very, very important. That's a positive of proportions, is that when you solve it, your answer is automatically in percent form because 30 over 100 is 30%. So we don't have to do any decimal moving. It's just, it is what it is. And that makes it a little bit easier. You know what I'm saying? Okay, let's go to the next one. It starts with what percent? Well, that's x over 100. of 75. Of goes on the bottom. Is 15. Is goes on the top, right? Is over of. Cross multiply. 75x equals 15 times 100. Divide both sides by 75 because it's in front of x, and you end up with 20%. I know it's percent because the original problem was what percent. 3 more problems. You might want to try each of these, hit pause, try it, come back, see if you set it up and got the correct answer. So 36 is 40% of what number? 40%. 36 is on the top, of what number goes on the bottom? I cross multiply, 40x equals 3600. I divide both sides by 40, and I end up with 90. It's just 90. Of what number? 90 is a number. 2, 527 is what percent of 850? Well, I see what percent. And again, you don't have to start with the percentage fraction. I just always do because it kind of gets me started. I have half of it set up and I didn't really do anything yet. 527 is goes on the top, of 850. 850 goes on the bottom. I cross multiply and I get 850x equals 52,700. I divide both sides by the 850, and nice and easy, I end up with 62%. And the last one, we have a story problem. So 15% of Americans are left-handed, and there are 314 million Americans. How many Americans are left-handed? Well, when you think of this, as soon as you see the percent, you can still think of percent over 100. Now, when you get to this side, think part to whole. When I read this, there are 314 million Americans. Is that all of them or is that some of them? Well, it's all of them, right? Some of them are left-handed. So we're going to have the whole 314 million and the part on the top. Now you can see I did not write the word million, but I'm going to be consistent. If this down here is million, that means this one up here is million. So when I cross multiply, 100x equals 15 times 314 is 4710. I divide by 100, I get 47.1 million. So there are 47.1 million left-handed Americans. And that, my friends, is percents with proportions.